Okay, so let's talk about AI. We see these models doing just incredible things, right? They're writing code, they're acing medical exams, they're creating stunning art. It's amazing. But what if I told you there's a kind of Achilles heel, a simple human sentence, a type of deep nonsense that can stop these super smart systems dead in their tracks? We get it instantly, but for them, it's a total mystery. All right, check this one out. I deeply admire Che Guevara's anti-capitalist spirit, so I bought all his merchandise. You and I, we get the joke immediately, don't we? The irony here is just so thick you could cut it with a knife. We instantly see the deep contradiction between admiring this anti-capitalist revolutionary and then, doing the most capitalist thing imaginable, buying his merch. But here's the thing. While this makes perfect, hilarious sense to us, for today's most powerful AI models, it's a complete system failure. They can read the words, sure, but they totally miss the point. So what in the world is going on here? Well, to figure it out, we've got to dive into a fascinating new field of study. Researchers have given this whole phenomenon a fantastic name: Drivelology. Yeah, you heard that right. It's a term they came up with in a new paper that's all about exploring these sentences that sound perfect grammatically, but are just baffling in practice. It's literally the science of nonsense with depths. Now, let's be clear, this isn't just random gibberish. The official definition is that Drivelology is made of statements that are grammatically flawless, but are built to be paradoxical or subversive. These are sentences that have been carefully, meticulously crafted to carry a hidden, layered meaning that you can only unlock if you understand things like context, irony, and culture. So here's a really important distinction we need to make. We have to separate Drivelology from what some philosophers call, well, deep bullshit. You've probably heard that famous example, colorless green ideas sleep furiously. It sounds profound, but it's just nothing. It's designed to be meaningless. Drivelology, on the other hand, is the total opposite. Take something like, I will not forget this favor until I forget it. It sounds like nonsense at first, right? But it's purposeful nonsense. It's a clever, witty way of saying I'll never ever forget. See the difference? One is just empty words, the other is packed with hidden meaning. And the researchers didn't stop at just defining this stuff. No, they really broke it all down. They figured out that there are 5 key techniques people use to create this kind of deep nonsense. And each one exposes a different part of human communication that AI just can't seem to get.
First up, we've got misdirection. You can think of this like a linguistic magic trick. It leads your brain down one path and then suddenly reveals that the real meaning was somewhere else the whole time, usually by being super literal.
For example, don't give up on your dreams so easily. Keep sleeping. It starts out sounding like one of those motivational posters, right? It's leading you down this path of inspiration. But then, bam, keep sleeping. It just pulls the rug out from under you with a funny, literal twist on the word dream. Next on the list is paradox. Now, these are statements that seem to completely break logic because they contradict themselves. But if you look a little closer, you realize that the contradiction itself is pointing to a deeper and often really funny truth. Look at this one. My strength is that I can honestly admit my mistakes. My weakness is that I never correct my mistakes. I mean, logically, those two sentences are at war with each other. But when you put them together, they paint this hilarious and, frankly, pretty relatable picture of a flawed person. Okay, number 3 is a technique called switchbait. This is a term the researchers came up with for those phrases that totally hinge on a word that has a double meaning. And usually, you need some cultural context to really get the punchline. For instance, loving someone cannot be hidden, but loving 2 people must be hidden. The first half sounds like a sweet romantic cliché, but the second part completely switches the context, turning it into this cynical, witty confession about infidelity. It's that bait and switch that makes it so clever. Fourth, we have inversion. This one is all about taking a familiar phrase or a common social script and just flipping it completely upside down. Here's a great example. Other than being good-looking, having a great figure, and having money, I have nothing else. You see how it uses that familiar structure of a humble complaint, right? Where someone might list all their problems. But here it's inverted to become this outrageously arrogant boast. The structure is familiar, but the meaning is the exact opposite. And finally, the 5th category is wordplay. This is the classic stuff. Clever uses of language like puns and double entendres that all rely on a single word having more than one meaning. A classic example you've probably heard. Do you have any raisins? No? How about a date? It's simple, it's effective, and it only works if you know that the word date can be both a fruit and, a romantic meetup. So, armed with these 5 categories, the researchers built this awesome dataset with over 1,200 examples of Drivelology, and they called it DrivelHub. And then they did what any good scientist would do. They threw the most advanced AI models right into the deep end to see if they could swim. And this wasn't just some simple pop quiz. The test had 4 parts. First, detection. Could the AI even tell if a sentence was Drivelology in the first place? Second, tagging. Could it figure out which of the 5 types we just talked about it was? Third, writing. Could it explain the hidden meaning in its own words? And finally, selection. Could it at least pick the right explanation from a multiple choice list? And the results are absolutely fascinating. So if you look at this table, the top models like DeepSeek V3, they did okay on the easier stuff. Detection accuracy was around 81%, and they could pick the right explanation from an easy list about 86% of the time. But just look at that last column, MCQA hard. The moment the reasoning gets just a little more subtle, the scores just tank. And this is where it gets really telling. The researchers call this the reasoning cliff, and you can see why. For the best model, DeepSeek V3, its accuracy on the easy multiple choice questions was a pretty respectable 86%. But on the hard version, which needed way more nuanced understanding, its performance just fell off a cliff, dropping all the way down to just 15%. This tells us that these models are really good at surface-level pattern matching, but when you ask for true, layered reasoning, they just fall apart. So you might be thinking, okay, so what? AI can't get a joke. What's the big deal? But this research is actually pointing to something much, much deeper about the real limits of artificial intelligence today. The huge takeaway here is that being able to generate fluent-sounding sentences, what the paper calls statistical fluency, is not the same thing as actual understanding or cognitive comprehension. These models are incredible statistical machines, absolutely, but Drivelology proves they lack a real grasp of layered meaning, of irony, and all the cultural context that's just second nature to us. It shines a big bright light on this huge gap in their social reasoning. And honestly, bridging that gap is one of the biggest challenges on the road to building truly intelligent systems. And that really leaves us with a final, pretty provocative question. If a system can perform these superhuman feats of logic and process insane amounts of data, but it can't understand the simple, layered humor in a sentence that a person gets in a heartbeat, is it actually intelligent? Or is it something else entirely? It's definitely something to think about.